What's going on, everybody? Patrick Auger, Ant Walker, Matthew Wells here for the Body Lock, and today we're talking about a pair of unfortunate releases from the UFC. Former UFC heavyweight champion Junior Dos Santos and title contender and ranked heavyweight Alistair Overeem have both been let go by the promotion. With Dos Santos, he did go to Instagram and release a statement saying that he thanked the UFC for the 12 years there. He wasn't done yet. He was going to figure out his next move. Sounds like he might continue to fight. Haven't heard anything from Overeem or Overeem's camp, so we don't know what the situation is there. We also know from a report at ESPN from Mark Ramundi that the UFC apparently did offer Dos Santos a short notice fight against Marcin Tybura for UFC 260 that Dos Santos did turn down before he was released. So these are two very big names that have been a major cornerstone of the UFC heavyweight division for as long as I can remember. And I'll start with you. What's your reaction to this?
The last thing I feel is surprise, actually. As much as we respect and love Junior Dos Santos and Alistair Overeem as fans, we kind of know one thing for sure about them. They are both near the end of the line of a potential career, especially looking at Junior Dos Santos. He's had 4 knockout losses in a row. Been a rough go of late for him. Overeem, on the other hand, while he did just drop his last one, he's had mixed results over the past several years that show that he's still got some life left in him as a viable contender in the heavyweight division. But at the same time, we are in the world where the UFC is getting rid of higher paid stars to make room for cheaper, and less experienced fighters. And when Dana White said, I believe it was late last year, that by 2021, we'd be seeing a lot of surprising names get their walking papers, Junior Dos Santos and Alistair Overeem were 2 of the first names that came to mind for me, simply because we know they get paid a lot more than the average fighter on the roster. And the writing was kind of on the wall about where they laid within the title picture. Junior Dos Santos firmly out of it with his string of losses, and Overeem always been, since he's gotten to the UFC, it's always the bridesmaid, never the bride, and just didn't seem like that would be something that would change, especially when the champion is someone that he has lost to at UFC 203, his only attempt at the heavyweight belt in the promotion. And then the next challenger, Francis Ngannou, has a highlight reel KO over him. So it didn't really seem like he had a way to win a belt. And the UFC has made it very clear, if you get paid more than that 10-10, and and you aren't exactly knocking on the door of a title shot, well, you are expendable. And that's what was shown tonight.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at how much they're getting paid, there's no denying that they're making much more than the average UFC fighter, especially Overeem, who had that Pride contract, carry over. I'll never forget UFC 203, where Stipe complained because he got less money than Overeem did, and Stipe was the champ. That's telling about how much money these guys are making. Matt, were you surprised by these guys getting let go, especially right now?
No, I wasn't surprised at all. And I think the media, are partially to blame for that because of how much we've been hyping up this heavyweight division and how exciting it is right now. And those 2 guys are not a part of that, that hype that we've been talking about. So, yeah, and going along with what Ant said, yeah, it's time for them to go, considering their string of losses and, up and downs. If in Overeem's case, these guys are just not what they used to be, man. I mean, Overeem has gone through so many different iterations of himself throughout his career. Even though he did, he put together 2 wins and then it just lost his last outing. It's not the same guy. It's not the same guy by any means. He's really kind of just out there where he's letting guys bring the fight to him. And where, like, as we saw in his last outing, like, he instantly shelled up 15 seconds into the fight against the fence. That's just not the type of fighter that the UFC had in mind when they signed Alistair Overeem initially. And I know we got a lot of highlights out of him throughout his career, or throughout his run in the UFC. But yeah, it's time to move on for him, especially considering how much money this guy makes. But more so than anything, it wasn't a surprise thing. It was a sadness thing because these are two of my favorite guys to watch and have been for many, many years. Junior Dos Santos, one of the nicest guys in the whole sport as a whole. I've had some fantastic interviews with him throughout his career. Some of my favorite interview moments that came sitting down with Junior Dos Santos. So it's just a sadness to see him no longer attached with, the most premium brand in the sport. And same with Overeem, man, because I remember years back, everybody was wondering, is Overeem ever going to even enter the UFC? And, we got that, but we didn't get Overeem in the UFC. We got the different version, but still, it was still fun to see them both compete at this level and have their successes. Although Overeem never got to wear that strap that we all kind of predicted that he would when he first came in.
Yeah, Overeem didn't quite, get that final belt, especially he said multiple times in this last run, right? This was going to be one final run. He was going to go for it. He seemingly lost to Volkov decisively, it seemed, and knocked him out of the title picture, especially for his time frame. So it's not super shocking, other than that apparently they cut him rather than he retired. If that's the case, it's developing stories, so we're not 100% on that. But if that's the case, that is a little shocking. I will say, based on the money, it makes perfect sense. When you're trying to bring in all these new contender guys, you've got enough new lifeblood in heavyweight now that you don't need all of the old guard still there. And those are two of the highest paid fighters on the UFC roster, bar none. So it makes a lot of sense. But I think another piece of this is where they were in the division when they left. And what I mean by that is, if you look at other fighters or big name fighters that have been released or left the UFC recently, Anthony Pettis, Yoel Romero, those guys, looking at them, both of them said, well, they wanted me to fight somebody, without really a name, or they wanted me to stay in a certain division I didn't want to fight in. The UFC wanted them to be gatekeepers in a way. They wanted, Yoel especially, they wanted to fight lower ranked competition, either unranked or 11 through 15 type thing. And Pettis, I think they wanted to keep him at welterweight and have him fight some unranked guys and be sort of a gatekeeper. And I think that's what the UFC envisions as a role for these fighters, that they don't get to stay, in this ranked, constantly fighting up, trying to get the belt type of situation. They have to kind of accept that they're going to be a gatekeeper if you're going to stay on. I think a perfect example of this is Andrei Arlovski, right? He makes old money that's been pretty much factored into his contract forever. He's paid a ridiculous amount, but he's pretty much accepted his role as a gatekeeper. Really what he's done is fought new up-and-coming guys, and he's been able to string some wins together for a win streak here or there, but he's gone on a lot of losing streaks. But he's generally fighting young up-and-coming guys, aside from the occasional vet that's come back, like Ben Rothwell, right, who was gone for a long time and then came, and they wanted to see how well he was going to do type of deal. If you accept your role as a gatekeeper, I think the UFC is far more willing to keep you on than if you start talking about, no, I want, ranked opponents. I want to, continue a run at this weight class, or I want to actually move up to a different weight class and make another run at the belt. I think the fact that they offered Dos Santos Tybura is a example of this. They expect you to kind of be ready to fight on a short notice because they're not really expecting you to win. They're trying to have somebody build their name off of beating you. And I don't think that either of these guys are in that position. I don't think Pettis or Romero would accept that either. And that's part of the reason that they both left. So I think it's that combination of being paid too much money, but then also not accepting a gatekeeper role that is really what led to them being cut. Because unless Arlovski has been released, and we don't know, you'd think that he would have been released far sooner than either of these guys when he hasn't been close to a title belt in years. So
yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
Really good point, Pat. I think it's also important to note, tying kind of all that together, is that this is also about the relevance of their names and their star power. Andrei Arlovski fights like someone who doesn't understand that he is a star in the sport, or that he has this name that still gets held up on a pedestal. Junior Dos Santos and Alistair Overeem very much well aware of their name and what it means to history, and they are treating it as such. For Junior Dos Santos to turn down a short notice fight against Merchant Tibera makes a lot of sense because, hey, I'm Junior Dos Santos. Why should I fight this guy on short notice? And if you're Alistair Overeem, I mean, Overeem was just saying a couple of weeks ago he wanted to make that run at the belt, win the belt, and then retire. You know, talk like that. That's superstar talk. That's not the sort of talk that says I'm a company man. And that seems to be the thing that the UFC is sort of boxing a lot of these names into being. They want you to be a company man. Being a company man and being a star well aware of your own brand does not mix 9 times out of 10. So I think this is them saying, hey, I am, you know, especially in the case of Junior Dos Santos. I mean, he is a former champion who has quite the name and quite the reputation. Even on the heel of so many losses, he's still someone that we hold on to a pedestal. So his name has value elsewhere. Same thing with Overeem. Whether he chooses to accept some of that value will be another story. But fellas, if you don't mind, Pat, I want to throw a question out there to you two. Do you think we'll see them fight again? I know JDS has said he will, but at the same time, you know, the retirement talk got a little louder after seeing him get finished for the 4th consecutive time. Overeem saying that he was going to walk away after winning the belt. I mean, do you think we see these two gentlemen again?
Personally, I think so. Let's say if Junior Dos Santos takes a year off and turns up at PFL for their next heavyweight season. Could you imagine that? If he takes his time off to recover from these knockout losses and then shows up refreshed, ready to go with a fire under his belly, he could make some noise, man. He'd only be 38 years old. He's not the oldest guy on the block. But yeah, obviously the knockout losses will have taken his toll, and they obviously have shown his recent performances. But Marcin Tybura, like, if that's a fight that, you know, he would take on a full camp, you'd have to imagine he'd be willing to step in there against, you know, anybody on the PFL roster for the most part, right? So I don't think it's a competition thing. I think it's like you were saying, Ant, that he's a guy that still respects his body enough to know that he needs a full camp. He needs to prepare in the proper way before taking fights, instead of just being like, you know, waiting by the phone, just taking a call and taking a fight whenever something, you know, the UFC calls and says, hey, it's your time. You got to listen to us now because you lost 4 in a row. Your history in this sport and with this organization be damned. So I'm glad he's, you know, kind of taking control in that sense. But I could definitely see him showing up at a PFL tournament and really making some noise. And, you know, that would be the biggest payday I think he could probably get at this point. Maybe. I don't know what Bellator would be looking at for him or any of these other promotions, you know, overseas or something like that. But for his sake, I hope so. And on the Overeem side, if he does decide to compete, man, I hope it's somewhere in Japan. I hope it's a Japan show. You know what? The pipe dream is still alive, man. We could still have Fedor and Overeem come together in 2021 for a New Year's Eve show at the end of the year. Just imagine that.
Yeah, no, I think Overeem, that's where he ends up almost certainly, especially because he's been talking about, right, he doesn't want to keep going unless it's for a belt or it's for something, right? He's acknowledged he's at the end of his career. Before the loss to Volkov, it was all about let's get the belt and retire. Now that that's gone, something like a New Year's Eve Ryzen show with a cross promotion with Bellator makes all the sense in the world. You could do Fedor versus Overeem, go out on that perfect fight. Why not do that? I think even if that fight isn't the one made, you probably still end up with Overeem over in Ryzen, because that's the one promotion that would look at his career, would make a lot of sense for him because of his roots in Japan, and would sign him for a 1 or 2 fight off, right? Because if you're Bellator or 1 or PFL, I doubt Overeem's going to fight more than 1 or 2 more times. So Ryzen, I think, is the perfect fit there. In terms of JDS, I like the idea of him going to the PFL and could see that. I honestly think he's going to end up boxing. He's talked about it a lot. in a previous life of going to do the boxing route, I would not be shocked if he ends up doing something similar to what Mark Hunt did and just goes and he does boxing fights, especially because that's something that he has said very recently that he still believes he can do and he's got the ability for. Would he go back to MMA eventually? Possibly, depends, but I really think he probably ends up in the boxing ring if he's not under a UFC contract right now, at least immediately. So that's where I think he ends up.
You know, for Overeem, I see him being somewhere where he can eat all the horse meat he wants. Like that I think is the key ingredient. I think the money that he can make outside of the UFC is going to be too big for him to turn down. And and with Fedor out there, like and you know, a couple other high profile heavyweights, there are enough names that make sense to see him fight. Even if it's not for a belt, he can make a lot of money on. Just let it happen. He can eat all the horse meat he wants, and we can see, you know, sort of middle-aged Overeem, and that's fine. Like that's sort of where he kind of makes sense for him to be. JDS, I'm kind of with you on this one, Pat. I don't really see mixed martial arts being the route he takes necessarily. I quite honestly wouldn't be surprised to see him turn up in BKFC or turn up on a Triller pay-per-view, you know, fighting I don't know, like Vander Holyfield or something totally nuts and just bonkers like that probably makes more sense. And if it is MMA, PFL makes a whole lot of sense. And you look at the typical fighter that they have on their roster, and they have a lot of wrestlers and you know, a lot of just grapplers mainly. You don't see too many like high flying strikers and whatnot, the sort of guys that have been knocking out JDS for the most part. I think you throw him into the PFL heavyweight tournament like now. I know the brackets are already set and that's a done deal, but you know, hypothetically, if you throw him in there right now, you might favor him over a great deal of those guys simply based on his style. So PFL would make a lot of sense for him. It's just a matter of where he can make the most money. Do you risk, you know, the tournament format where, yeah, you can make $1 million at the end of it, but you got to go through some kind of tough guys, or can you make a couple of mil on some goofy boxing event? Which one? And considering that he's wanted to box forever, I mean, the guy still walks out to the Rocky theme, then yeah, he might as well just do that now while he can. So maybe he'll fight on the same card as Anderson Silva and Roy Jones or something like that. That makes a lot of sense to me. But Overeem, man, it's just so much money out there for him. He can certainly clean up on a Ryzen pay-per-view for New Year's.
Yeah, hard to deny he wouldn't be able to get near what he was making in the UFC, if not that much, if he went over to Ryzen, especially given his roots and everything going on there. Well, let us know in the comments what you think about JDS and Overeem being released. How do you feel about it? Is it shocking to you? You know, are you pissed? What's, you know, sad, melancholy? What are you feeling about two, you know, legends of the sport being released from the UFC? And then also, where would you like to see him go next? Boxing, PFL, Ryzen? Let us know. Let us know what dream matchups you want to see now that these guys are free agents. And with that, to wrap it up, it's one of those things where, you know, this is definitely an end of an era any way you look at it. So make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe, the little bell notification button, and hopefully we don't see too many more of these legends be released in this manner.